unfortunately. I'm going to just start recording in a moment.
Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I got it out. I've been telling everybody good morning. I'm so used to doing services here. So it's always good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. And the first time I have to say good afternoon, I actually got it right. And anybody that knew my dad, they knew he was a very prompt person. If you were 10 minutes early, you're late. And we are actually starting on time. It is now 1 o'clock. So I might have messed a lot of stuff up when preparing for this, but we are starting on time. We do have a few songs selected that we're going to play throughout the service, and I think it's fitting that we start with Conway Twitty. I woke up crying late at night when I was very young. I had dreamed my father had passed away and gone. My world revolved around him. I couldn't lie there anymore. So I made my way down the mirror hall and tapped upon his door. And I said, Daddy, I'm so afraid. How will I go on with you gone that way? No more to cry anymore. So may
Later we barely got along, this teenage boy and me. Most of the fights, it seems, were over different dreams. We each held for me. He wanted knowledge and learning. I wanted to fly away. Said I could make it out there if I just had the facts. I got and will you loan me the rest? And I said, Daddy, I'm so afraid there's no guarantee in the plans I made. And if I should fail, who will pay my way back home? He said, that's my job. That's what I do. Everything I do is because of you. To keep you safe with me. That's my job, you see. Every person carves his spot and fills the hole with light. And I pray someday I might light as bright as he. Woke up early one bright fall day, spread the tragic news. After all my travel, I settled down within a mile or two. I make my living with words and rhyme, and all this tragedy should go into my head and out instead as bits of poetry. But I say, Daddy, I'm so afraid. How would I go on when you've gone this way? How can I cover with a song to say I love you? That's my job. That's what I do. Everything I do is because of you. To keep you safe with me. That's my job, you see. Everything I do is because of you. To keep you safe with me.
We are reminded in the book of Ecclesiastes about time and purpose. We are told there is a time for every appointed, there is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every matter under heaven. There's a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embracing, a time to search and a time to give up as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear apart and a time to sew together, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. I cannot say that this is not a time to mourn, because mourning or grieving, no matter what you want to call it, it's a natural reaction when we lose someone we love. But while this is a time to mourn, It's also time to reflect on the life that Don lived. To me, it sounds so strange calling him Don. He's always been Dad to me, but for this purpose, being that all of his friends are here, it's going to be Don. Just like my old coach from 30 years ago came in here, and I told his wife, I can't call him Rod. Here I am, 53 years old. I've been out of school since 1991, and he is still coach to me. It's just, he will always be Dad. But it is a time to reflect on the life that Dad lived. It's also a time to remember. Remember that special place that Don held in our hearts as a friend, a co-worker, but most importantly, our Father. And finally, it's a time to rejoice as we come together, to celebrate and share special memories that we have at the time we were able to spend with Don, Dad. It's going to come out one way or the other. Maybe it'll start with D, so I guess I get mine anyway. As long as I don't start calling my own name, we'll be all right. But if you think about it, when our time comes, we are all defined by three things. We have three things in common. We all have a day that we're born. We all have a day that we unfortunately pass. But anytime you see an epitaph, headstone, obituary, you'll have the date of birth, you'll have the date of passing, but there's something in the middle. It's often overlooked just because it's a little punctuation mark. No one really thinks about that. Little mark in between the date of birth and the date of passing is a dash. While you might not think that it's that important, think about this. That dash is our life. That dash represents what we've done. It represents the family that we've gathered. It represents the friends that we've made. Maybe smiles that we've put on other people's faces. Think about it for a second. What have you done with your dash? What have you done with your life? How will people remember you? If you were to look at a regular obituary, we could say that Donald Sanchez was born on the 6th of December 1944 in Canyon City, Colorado. He was born to Salvadoran Fern Sanchez, and he peacefully passed away in Pueblo, Colorado on the 31st of May, 2026. Don grew up in Westcliff, where he attended and graduated from Custer County High School. While there, I'm getting terrible feedback here. While at Custer County High School, he excelled in both football and basketball. I remember looking at his senior yearbook. They had all the accomplishments, and he was in this sport and these grades, and this sport and these grades. And it said he was in the class play. And then it also said that he was voted best physique. And as I looked at that, I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, that's where I got it from. Best physique. But Dad graduated from Custer County High School in 1962. In 1964, he began a career with the United States Department of Agriculture as a soil conservation technician. And this was a career that would span over 7 decades until 2025. He served as a U.S. Army Reservist from 1965 to 1971 until he received an honorable discharge. On the 10th of November 1967, Dad married the love of his life, Shirley Fisher. They had a marriage which lasted over 57 years when she passed. Dad was a lifelong Denver Bronco fan, a supporter of Colorado State University, all else fails, you go with plan B. My voice usually has no problem carrying, but once my mouth starts getting so dry, it can only go so far. But as I was saying, Dad was a lifelong Denver Bronco fan, a supporter of CSU Pueblo sports from 2008 until he passed away. He was preceded in death by his parents, Salvador and Fern Sanchez, his sister, Joyce Laughlin, his favorite uncle, Johnny Cowan, their infant son, Andrew, and his wife, Shirley Sanchez. And he's survived by his three sons, Don Jr., Brad, myself, his grandson, Robert, numerous brothers and sisters-in-law, nieces, and nephews. One thing that I got to do a lot near the end was I got to go out to the mesa at least once a week with Dad. They would gather, they would have coffee, they would have breakfast. A bunch of older, notice I said older, not old men, but there was more than once I would sit there and I would listen to all these different guys, mainly old ranchers, old cowboys, and they would tell their stories. And at one point, as I was listening to their stories, I thought this is like sitting in the middle of a Tom T. Hall song. And then I started thinking about something that I had written. And it was kind of fitting, sitting there listening to their stories, talking about old times, talking about family, talking about kids. And it struck me that I wrote about it, and I didn't even realize it. It says, I overheard two old men and all the stories they had to share. As they rambled on, people passed them by, for they were too busy to care. The stories all seemed to be funny. A laugh was not hard to find. Then one asked the other, if you were to pass, what would you leave behind? Without hesitation, the first man answered, I would leave behind my great wealth, gold and silver, stocks and bonds. That means more to me than my health. The second man said, if it was my time, I know what I'd leave to make people remember me. Sons and daughters, grandkids aplenty. 'Tis quite the legacy. Then they set their gaze upon me. They saw I was standing there. Young man, they said in unison, you've heard both of our stories. What do you have to share? At first, I just stood there, silent, in thought, for I had nothing to leave behind. But they did not leave, and they did not waver. So I had to respond in kind. Unlike you, I said to the first man, I have no fortune to claim. I've been a hardworking man for all my life, but I don't have a penny to my name. To the other man I retorted, I do not have a child, let alone 2 or 3. I have walked the path of a single man, so I guess it's only me. However, if I had to decide if there was one gift I would leave behind, it would not be anything material, just the words that are in my mind. Some words were used to inspire, some to teach, while others made people cry. But those whom I've met will remember my words, though I really can't tell you why. As I walked away, the air was filled with the sound of singing birds. Money is spent, and our kids may forget us, but we will always have our words. And I do know that to some of us, Dad was a man of few words. And I will kind of touch upon that in the eulogy, which will come a little bit later. But at this time, and I've done this in every service I've officiated, and the result is usually not overwhelming. But I would like to ask anybody who has a memory, a story, anything they would like to share about Dad, to either come up front and share that memory, or if you don't feel like being up here, we do have the portable mic, and I would be more than happy to bring it to you. Don't let me down.
I'll meet you halfway. How do you use these? Just hold it up. Hi. I just wanted to say that my memories of Don are so heartfelt and so warming because he really cared. We're ranchers and he was on it all the time, wanted to know how we're doing, how the cows are, how the grass is, what's going on. I mean, it was sincere from the bottom of his heart that he cared so much and was such a sincere person all the time. I don't remember ever that he just didn't take time to stop and talk to you, whether he had time or not. and I want to say that, you know, there are not very many people that you can tell their heart is huge, but his heart was huge. And as a Stro, I'm touched and I'm missing him all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, she broke the ice. Who else do we have?
I'm a neighbor of Don and Shirley in Pueblo for 10 or 15 years, whenever they moved there. They were just good people, and at Christmas, she'd bake some stuff, and I'd bake them well, I wouldn't bake it, my wife would bake them a pumpkin bread, take it across. We were just good neighbors and pretty good friends, and he'll be missed.
I knew once a person started talking, we'd be able to get this ice broken.
Well, I met Don 40-some years ago. I was a pretty young ranch manager and didn't know a lot. And Don came in and on a Great Plains project, started helping me put in structures. Robert and I were both there. And instead of criticizing a young guy who didn't know a lot, he stood there to help me and made suggestions without being critical. And our relationship grew. He did care, as she mentioned a minute ago. Probably nobody in this area has done more to help all of us as ranchers improve the quality of our places. He wanted things done right. He took great pride and was punctual. If I had an appointment with him, you could bet he'd be there waiting for me when I got there. Don he spent all those years with soil conservation, and Don didn't complain, but we talked a lot. He said, you know, I never got a college degree. I went right to work and then went into the reserves. And he said, because I didn't have that piece of paper, they didn't let me advance very far. He said, I'm not complaining. It was a great job, benefits. I love what I do. But he said, throughout the whole state, when there was a problem that none of the guys with the piece of paper could handle, guess who they called? And Don, being the kind of guy he was, didn't back down from it. He went. I started to say he swallowed his pride. I'm not sure. He took pride in what he did. but he wasn't too proud to help somebody out. And Don was such a good friend. Toward the end, when your mom, Shirley, was so bad, he would text me most mornings and he'd say, "Would you please pray for Shirley? She's not having a good day." And Don, Shirley's faith with me over and over. That was very important to him. So important to your mother, her faith in Jesus Christ. And I appreciated that. He loved these days trucking with Ellis Weir and those weekends that he took off. But he truly did care about each and every person. And I'll never forget that with Don.
Hi, my name is Bobby, I'm not a rancher. Shirley and I worked together many, many years as nurses. My special moment with your dad and Mr. Don was thanks Darren and Brad for giving up their Bronco tickets. We went with them on the bus and it was the best time. We had a great, great time.
I've been asked to read this note from some church members here, Robert Muir, Rhonda Muir, ranchers out east, and this is to those gathered. Don and Shirley Sanchez family and friends. I apologize for not being able to attend Don's memorial today due to the ongoing issues, treatments, and tests that I have. Wanda and I want the Sanchez family to know that we thought about and prayed for Don and Shirley many times. Wanda and I remember Don when he came to our property to advise us on our grass and our pot. Wanda and I remember seeing Don and Shirley walking in Lathrop State Park many times. Wanda and I remember Don when he showed concern for my health issues. He offered advice and encouragement, even though he had his own issues. Wanda and I remember Don and Shirley always treated us as well and as friends. Most of all, Wanda and I remember Don and Shirley as brothers and sisters in Christ. May God bless the Sanchez family in every way. Our prayers and our sympathies are with them. Robert K. and Wanda J. Near. P.S. It's okay to read this at Don's memorial if you choose.
Would anyone else like to share a memory or a story or a clever anecdote?
Toward the end there, when Dad had stopped driving, at least from the driver's seat, did plenty of driving from the passenger seat for any of us that were driving his car. I'd go up a lot of time on Saturday still overnight and bring him down here Sunday morning so he could go to church. And we'd be driving along, and I'd catch him out of the corner of my eye when we were coming up the hill outside Park City, and he'd always have his phone up, taking pictures of the mountains. And anybody who was friends with him on Facebook could attest, he liked posting these pictures of the mountains and whatever views just happened to catch his eye when he was out going somewhere. And that's just one of those things that will stick with me, is how he would find just a simple beauty in just an everyday view. And he always loved it like it was the first time he had seen it. Wanted to share it with everybody. Just interesting catching him on the corner of my eye, and he'd have his phone up, taking pictures through the window. I'll always remember that. Pointing out the deer and the antelope, the cows. Yeah, he always loved those drives up here.
And anybody that doubts the story about taking pictures of the mountains, all you have to do is look at his Facebook page. Before I hang the mic back up, is there anyone else who would like to speak? You know, when we lose a close friend, coworker, or a family member, that loss tends to create sudden voids in our lives. In the hours, days, weeks, months, or even years to follow, we find ourselves searching for answers. In those answers, we hope to find strength. We hope to find comfort. We hope to hear that magic little phrase, everything will be okay. Throughout the ages, scholars, poets, philosophers, the Hallmark Company, they have searched for a way to bring comfort to those who are grieving. But unfortunately, nobody has been able to find that exact phrase, that exact combination of words that brings the comfort that we're looking for. Because there are no words that can ease the pain or dry those tears. Grieving is normal. Oh, and we found that out the hard way. Grieving is normal, and it is to be expected. There is no right way or wrong way to grieve. Each person grieves in their own way, and we each turn to a different source when we're looking for comfort. Some people will turn to music, some will turn to nature, some turn to a bottle, while others turn to the Bible. We are reminded in 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18, where it says, "But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve as indeed the rest of mankind do, who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, so also God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep through Jesus. For we say this to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we who are alive, who remain, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. For we will always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words." John 14:1 through 6. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you, because I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I am coming again, and I will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you also will be. And you know the way where I am going." And Thomas said to Jesus, "Lord, we do not know where we are going. How do we know the way?" And Jesus said to him, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Now comes the eulogy, and anyone who I've been in contact with recently knows that I struggled mightily writing this. When Mom passed, the obituary came easy, except for trying to remember all of her siblings' names. And Aunt Hazel, I still owe you a big one for that. You pulled my bacon out of the pan big time. I love you and I thank you. Mom's eulogy was easy. I don't know why. I just sat down and it all came out. Dad's was not. And you'll see why. First thing I wrote down is, how do you eulogize someone that you never really knew? One thing I can clearly state is that Dad, Don, he was a difficult man to get to know. He was a different man depending on his surroundings and whether he was around family or friends. When Dad was around friends, he was happy, joking, always smiling. But around family, he was silent, he was stern, he was just a different person. One thing I've told many people is that Mom and Dad were like night and day. They were exact opposites. Or not. But they were exact opposites. Their families were exact opposites. And it really showed. Mom came from a large, loving, musical family. Almost like the Von Trapps. Dad came from a small family, a quiet family. And I am not speaking ill of anyone, but my grandparents were the same way. Salvador and Fern, they were quiet. I'm a quiet person myself, but there were often times where the silence would be uncomfortable sitting in a room with them because nobody spoke. Nobody smiled, nobody hugged. Mom's family, they were the exact opposite. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the way the family environments that they grew up in were just, it was obvious how different they were, but they each served a purpose. One thing I can say about Dad, and anyone in here can attest to this, he was a hard worker. Just the fact that his career spanned 61 years is a testament to that statement. He started his career with the United States Department of Agriculture in Mesa County, Colorado in 1964. Over the next 14 years until 1978, he moved from Mesa County to Gunnison County to Chaffee County, each serving the same purpose along the way. And then in 1978, he was transferred to Warfordville County. I was 5 years old at the time. And he worked within Warfordville County for another 47 years until he finally had to give it up. Now, he retired more than once. In 2006, Dad retired after 42 years with the federal government. He had a banquet complete with food, plaques, speeches, gifts, the whole shebang. And then he went back to work. Considering that this was 20 years ago already, I can't remember exactly how long it was before he went back to work, but he went from going 4 or 5 days a week with the federal government to working 3 or 4 days a week with the county doing the exact same job. It was part-time, but he was still working. After a while, he retired again from the Warfordville County government, and once again, he got the plaques and the speeches and the food and the gifts. And I once made the joke that Dad didn't like work, he just liked retirement for all the free stuff. But he was a hard worker. After his second retirement, he went back again. I was at the county clerk's office one day getting my plates renewed, and one of the ladies that works in the office, her husband and her family, they're all ranchers out east of town. And she asked me, when's your dad coming back to work? I told her, probably soon. She was good. No one else can do what he does. And I kind of found out that way that They kept calling him back to work because nobody could do what he did. Like the gentleman in the back said, there you had all these guys with degrees. They paid all this money to go to college, they got their degrees, they've got big certificates saying, I can do the job, but they couldn't do the job. He knew the work, he knew the ranchers, he knew the roads. He knew every road in this county like the back of his hand. Of course, he didn't know the names of all the roads. We'd be sitting there in Pueblo, and he'd be looking at his phone, and I knew he was on Facebook because he would always say, where's County Road 510? Like, oh, he's looking at one of the Warfield County pages. That's the road into Navajo, Dad. Okay. Where's County Road 504? That's the turnoff by the Rio Cacheros. It takes you to 69. Okay. But he knew his job. He knew the people that he worked with. And that is so hard to replace. It's kind of funny, Dad was still working one day every week, one day every other week, up until 2025. Things changed within his line of work, and he suddenly needed a fancy little computerized card to start his government pickup. So he had to get fingerprinted. Guess who took him to get fingerprinted? Then he had to go to Lakewood to get his photo taken. They couldn't take his picture anywhere in Pueblo or Colorado Springs. He had to go to Lakewood, Colorado, just to get his photo taken for this special little card to start his truck. Guess who got to drive him to Lakewood? And Brad mentioned him being the best backseat driver in the world. You never had to drive in Denver with the man. I'm not speaking ill of the dead, but even if he wasn't driving, he was in control of the vehicle. Whether it was how fast you were going, what was playing on the radio, he directed the whole thing.
And the horn.
Yeah, more than once we'd be in, like, leaving Bronco games, and he would be in the back seat. He and Mom would be in the back seat, Brad and I would be in the front. Someone would cut us off or step out in front of us, and we'd hear, honk at him. Oh! Yeah, it's kind of funny. I can stand up here and say that Dad was a technician with soil conservation and natural resources, but I can honestly say that I had no idea what he did for a living. Growing up, someone had asked, what does your dad do for work? Soil conservation. What does that mean? Well, soil conservation. That's all I knew. I knew he would leave before the sun came up. Many nights he would come home after the sun had gone down. But I didn't know what he did. I knew he worked with farmers and ranchers, but I never knew what that job entailed. When I was in elementary school, probably 4th grade, 5th grade, somewhere along those lines, he actually showed up. Someone contacted him. He came in with the reel-to-reel projector. Some of you of a certain age can remember the reel-to-reel projectors. He came in with the projectors and he actually showed us what he did. Even after sitting there for 45 minutes to an hour or however long this video was, I walked out of that classroom still not knowing what the man did for a living. My entire life, I knew soil conservation. Quick answer, easy answer, no other answers after that because I had no other information. He took pride in what he did. And he kept going to work until the government shut down in September or October of 2025. I can't remember the exact month. We seem to have so many shutdowns. But he kept going to work until the government shut down and he was told he couldn't go to work. And it was during that time he started to decline. And I take pride in admitting that my dad's work ethic rubbed off on me. I may have gotten his hairline too, but I am proud to have received his work ethic. Another thing I can say about Dad is he was not like the father figures that we would see on TV. He wasn't Dr. Huxtable on the Cosby Show. He wasn't the dad on My Three Sons. He wasn't Ward Cleaver. There were no heartfelt father and son talks where he would sit on the foot of the bed. He'd talk to us and we'd learn a lesson. No, we learned our lessons other ways. Most of the time we didn't know we were learning lessons at that moment. Take, for example, one of my brothers, who will remain nameless to protect his innocence, he turned 18. He left the house that evening, and in my mind, he and a few select friends sat around in a circle and discussed daily events and politics and likes and dislikes. And as he was on his way home, he tripped and fell face first into a puddle of adult alcoholic beverages. And the sudden gasp of surprise from falling into that puddle of alcoholic beverages, he swallowed a little bit, just a little bit. But the shock to his system made him sick the next day. Now that next day also happened to coincide with our aunt's birthday. They shared a birthday. So we went to Pueblo to meet with Grandma and Grandpa and the Laughlins. And, along the way up there, he voiced a need to stop so he could relieve himself of some of what he had drank the night before. So we pulled over, and as he was doing what he needed to do, Dad, sitting in the driver's seat, looked up in the rearview mirror at Brad and I. Sorry, darling, I just gave you a look. He looked at us in the mirror, and he said, "I hope you learn a lesson from this." We weren't the one with our heads hanging out the door, but we were the ones who were supposed to learn a lesson from this. And another thing he taught us without intending to teach us was which words were bad. I would like to stand up here and say I never saw my dad lose his temper. I would like to say with a straight face and without getting hit by lightning that our dad never muttered a curse word. But that just would not be true, especially during Bronco games. Those were some interesting times in our house. You could tell how the Broncos were doing just by the language used in the house. Anyone walking by would hear "you no good so-and-so" and "filth and foul, foul, filth, and all filth, here, foul, filth," and us boys would just be sitting there soaking it all in. And there was a time in our lives where we didn't know these were bad words until we used them in front of Mom. I had never seen that woman move so fast or hit so hard. But that's how we learned. Without knowing we were learning, that's how we learned what words were good and what words were bad. I do admire the fact that Mom and Dad stayed active well into their late 70s. They enjoyed their daily walks. They were very active with several groups from the Wesley United Methodist Church. They were season ticket holders for the Broncos, as Bobby Joe mentioned earlier, up until COVID. After that, the season that COVID hit, the Broncos started putting out notices of, we're going to restrict this, and we're going to restrict this, and we're going to restrict this. That's about the point where Dad, the lover of rules, he decided to give up his season tickets just because there were too many rules. And they attended almost every home sporting event for CSU Pueblo as members of the PAC Club. every football game, every wrestling event, every basketball game, even softball and baseball, and Lord knows what other sports they went and watched. They were out there every afternoon. Even after Mom passed last year, Dad never missed a single CSU football game. All of last year, he went. Either Brad and I, one of us were with him every game. He went to every game. But after Mom passed, Dad began to slow down. His personality changed a lot. And anyone who knew him before and after, they could see the change. And as his health declined, he started to miss more events. He started talking about how much he missed Mom, how he wanted to go home to Mom, and saying that he loved her, which was something we'd never heard, and I'll touch on that in a minute.
I read a note my grandma wrote back in 1920. Grandpa kept it in his coat and he showed it once to me. He said, boy, you might not understand, but a long, long time ago, Grandma's daddy didn't like me none, but I loved your grandma so. We had this crazy plan to meet and run away together. Get married in the first town we came to and live forever. But nailed to the tree when we were supposed to meet instead. I found this letter, and this is what it said. If you get there before I do, don't give up on me. I'll meet you when my chores are through. I don't know how long I'll be, but I'm not gonna let you down. Darling, wait and see. And between now and then, till I see you again, I'll be loving you. Love me. I read those words just hours before my grandma passed away. In the doorway of the church where me and grandma stopped to pray. I know I never seen him cry in all my 15 years. But as he said these words to her, his eyes filled up with tears. If you get there before I do, don't give up on me. I'll meet you when my chores are through. I don't know how long I'll be, but I'm not gonna let you down. Darling, wait and see. And between now and then, till I see you again, I'll be loving you. Love me. Between now and then, till I see you again, I'll be loving you. Love me.
As I mentioned earlier, Dad worked up until the government shut down in autumn of '25. But unfortunately, by the time he was told he could go back to work, his health had declined. I spent the vast majority of my off time with Dad, and I watched a man who was always active and always such a hard worker slowly decline. Then within the first few months of 2026, Dad's health got to the point where he couldn't drive, couldn't walk without assistance from a walker, and eventually couldn't care for himself. I believe it was Miss Reber that I told earlier that it happened suddenly. One day he was walking, still standing, getting out of the chair by himself, and then I don't know what happened, but he couldn't sit up in bed on his own. He couldn't take care of himself. So Brad and I started talking with Dad, talking with different healthcare professionals, and we decided it came to a point where he needed 24-hour care. He had to go into a home. And I will not lie, I was expecting World War III when it came time to put Dad in the home. It took us talking to him, it took a couple other people from hospice talking to him until he finally said he would go. And then an hour later, when the AMR people showed up at the house to transport him to the care center, I don't know if he forgot or if he was just being stubborn. You could go either way. But he saw them come in and he said, well, what are they here for? And we told him they're here to take you to the care center. Well, I don't want to go. Well, we talked him into going. We even helped the EMTs take him from the hospital bed that had just been installed 2 hours earlier. It's like the shortest stint a hospital bed has ever been used in a home. But we got him onto the cot, out to the ambulance. We went back the next day, and all the way to Pueblo, I was just picturing the battle. I don't want to stay here. You can't make me stay here, but Dad, you need to stay here. I don't want to stay here. We walked in, and the first words out of his mouth were, I like it here. I don't know what happened between 6 o'clock Friday evening and 11 o'clock Saturday morning when we went in there, but he said he liked it there. But as we were transitioning towards having Dad put in a care center, this song by Sawyer Brown kept playing over in my head.
Down a long dusty driveway, didn't want to go, but I set out with tears in my eyes of wondering. Daddy took me by the hand, got the school bus and his little man and said, don't worry, boy, it'll be alright. 'Cause I took this walk you're walking now, boy, I've been in your shoes. Well, you can't hold back the hands of time, it's just something you got to do. So by your eyes, I understand just what you're going through. 'Cause I took this same walk with my own man, boy, I've been in your shoes. Down a long dusty driveway, I set my mind to go. Well, I was 18 and wild and free, and wondering. Daddy took me by the hand, looked out at the world and the hills from man. Said, don't worry, boy, it'll be alright. Cause I took this walk, you're walking now, boy, I've been in your shoes. Well, you can't go back the hands of time, it's just something you got to do. By your eyes, I understand just what you're going through. Cause I took this same walk with my own man, boy, I've been in your shoes. Down a long dusty driveway, it's time to go, we go. Oh, yeah, roll over and gray, it's time wasn't wondering. Daddy took me by the hand, said I know where we're going, and I understand. Don't worry, boy, it'll be alright. Cause I took this walk, you're walking now, boy, I've been in your shoes. Well, you can't hold back the hands of time, it's just something you got to do. So dry your eyes, I understand